Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where you'll hear from industry leaders in science, technology, and innovation about the power of strategic storytelling. With decades of experience, our guests will share their own insights and real-world stories to help you avoid red light barriers and ignite green light solutions, from the Zoom room to the boardroom. In each episode, we'll corkscrew downward into the guests' personal experiences of challenge and success, highlighting strategies that turn complex ideas into clear, compelling storylines for stakeholders. Here is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips to try immediately to drive the vision of innovation with your team. Here is where expert minds share stories that shape the future. What's more, you'll walk away with tips to try immediately that drive the vision of innovation with your team. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Red Light, Green Light, the podcast where we bring to you senior leaders in science, technology, and innovation to share some stories with you of their learnings, their wins, and maybe a few tricky places they've experienced in their careers so that you can learn from them. Today, I'm really excited to have with me in the studio, Nichole Bui. Nicole is a senior level executive who is in the IT consulting space, and she currently lives outside of the DC metro area and has been a pleasure to get to know and to work with in the past. Nicole, how are you today? Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes. Thank you for coming and sharing some of your stories with us and with our listeners and viewers. As usual, we're going to start by just getting a little bit of your background out for our listeners and viewers so we can understand more about the sandbox you've played in for the last 20 or so years. Why don't you go ahead and share with our audience your zone of genius, kind of what propelled you into the IT space from your early years. Go ahead and give us a sketch.
Right. And actually, so my family and I immigrated here from Vietnam back in 1980, actually. So you're talking about a long time ago.
Yes.
And so, my parents came here after the Vietnam War in search of a better life for us. Mm-hmm. And so we've been here since then. And my career, I would say my first job was at a fabric store, actually, when I was in high school in like summer of my junior year.
Okay.
And even then I was working with customers to essentially help them design their gowns, their wedding gowns, whatever, but helping them pick the right fabric for within the budget that they have, for essentially kind of their ideal, whatever occasion.
Okay.
And so even as, when I was younger, is working with customers, taking designs and putting ideas together to fit within their budget. And that's really very much what I do today. And I enjoy it. I love working with coming up with solutions, bringing ideas to work within their budget. Because actually, one of the things, when my parents first came here, we essentially left with nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So we had to start all over. And so money was always going to be tight. So that has really, I would say, kind of instilled in me the values of what it means, the value of a dollar.
Yeah.
And so I really take that dollar and stretch it, not just for myself, but whatever I do, I'm very conscious about how I spend my customers' dollars and, the money that they invest in the solution and things that we do for them. So I'm always looking for innovative ideas to work within their budget constraints.
That's great. We want to be able to meet people where they are and where their
Absolutely.
resource levels are. And even from your time working in a fabric store, which of course seems to have nothing to do with what you currently do, but obviously there's a lot of similarities, and pardon the pun, but there's a lot of similar threads to that story.
Exactly.
Nicole, I'm curious, when you, did you seek out a job at a fabric store because you liked to sew or had some, desire to learn more about textiles in the industry? Or was it just sort of like that was the job that you got the offer for when you were in high school and then it became something that you liked? Which was it?
Actually, it's a funny story because with that also thrives in how I've gotten my jobs throughout my career and
Oh,
professionally as well,
okay. Tell
because
us.
it's through the owner of it's a family owned business, and
Okay.
so the husband and wife that owned the store was a friend of my mom's,
Okay.
and so they needed help, and it's a small business, and certainly, finding good help and help that they trust, right?
Yeah.
That with and place of trust with their business
Hmm.
is essentially something that they were interested in. And so for the
Okay.
longest time, they were afraid to go on vacations because they didn't have somebody they could trust to kind of handle the money. And
Okay.
I essentially became somebody they trusted and left. We
Hmm.
were able to go on vacations and essentially kind of hand me the keys to the store, being able to work with their customers, manage
Yeah.
the financial. So those essentially items from early on has essentially kind of been a thread essentially through my career. So
Yeah.
networking with folks, understanding, and really been going from one company to another has been through relationships.
Well, I love that. And with daughters right now who are in their early careers, right as I'm speaking, I have one daughter who's job hunting, another in college, and then we have two others at home. It's interesting to hear that networking and trust building and, that management of your personal brand, if you will, even at that young age, not only was part of your path, but was what led you into the other pieces of your career path
Right.
past that. So not
Right.
everybody can say that. And I think that's a really interesting component of how you began. Were you living on the East Coast when you first moved here and when you were working in those early roles?
Absolutely. I've always been here. We were sponsored here by my cousin and always lived in like the 208, 20X kind of YZ type of
Yeah.
zip code. And,
Yeah.
when we came here, we were in Silver Spring. I'm currently
Yep.
in Rockville now. And so if you talk about with probably within a 10-mile radius
Okay.
from when we first came here.
Love that.
So,
Well, as you know, I was living in that neck of the woods, so to speak, many years ago. We started out with, I lived for a while in Alexandria, Virginia, and we
yeah,
lived and worked in the DC area. It is
right.
such a beautiful part of the country, and it's very active, and obviously a lot of companies and opportunities in that part of the country as well. So a good place to come and plant, I would suggest.
Absolutely. And I would say that because I actually started my career well, not career, but I went to University of Maryland, College Park,
Okay.
and started my degree in aerospace engineering. But then at that point, I started to see the writing on the wall, so to speak, and that sector, that industry wasn't doing well. And so I shifted towards computer science. And I had received, a full scholarship there. So there wasn't a lot of additional courses I need to take to be able to do a computer science degree. So I actually ended up graduating with 2 degrees. Sometimes people say two majors, but I actually have 2 degrees in both aerospace engineering as well as computer science. And what
Okay.
I enjoy about computer science is just really the problem solving. I
Okay.
love to be able to solve, debug essentially, programs like software programs,
Mhm.
writing code, and then be able to build something tangible that
Mhm.
addresses a customer or problem.
And as a young female, frankly, in a world where it was probably many males in the
Yes.
field, right?
Yes.
That's definitely something my daughter is experiencing as a math major. As she goes into higher and higher levels of math classes, the ratio is becoming very noticeable in terms of, male to female. Did you have anyone in your orbit, male or female, who was a guide for you during some of those phases of learning, some of the strategies about problem solving or coding, or who stands out as someone you might kind of tip your hat to, if you will, when you think backward about your career path?
So when I was in college, I did a co-op with MITRE. And so
Oh,
after when I graduated, I got a position with MITRE, but then they split between MITRE and MITRE Tech. And so
okay.
I was at a MITRE Tech. So this is very early on in my career as a
Hmm.
developer. And
Hmm.
I had an associate director whose name is Dennis Copeland. So if he's out there, love to give a nod to him.
Hmm.
But even at an early stage, what I learned, I was helping look for candidates in terms of being able to review resumes, identifying candidates that we should essentially speak to and interview to kind of help grow our team. And so and I always remember it, is that he always said, when you look for resumes and reviewing it, look for your replacement. And it was
Oh,
very interesting that he said that because, sometimes people would be afraid to hire people that are more capable than they are. But
yes.
what he said was, if you hire somebody, essentially your replacement, then you have an opportunity to move and to grow.
Right.
So that's how
Right.
I saw it, was it's an opportunity to expand and not
Yep.
really fear, somebody that may be more capable, because you want to surround. I mean, the way that I love to learn is surrounding myself with people that are more capable, because then I
Yeah.
grow and I grow from it, and I learn
Yes.
from what they do.
What a wise piece of advice. And it rings true for me because I remember the same advice coming with slightly different nuance when I was working early on in advertising. It was the phrase, never be the smartest person in the room,
Right.
in a sense, right? And you could translate that to the hiring advice that you just mentioned, where not only can we grow and learn from others in the room, but especially when we think of ourselves as always wanting to learn more and be educated and never feeling we've totally arrived. And
Right.
I think that, but you're putting a cool spin on that, like look for your replacement. What a really jarring reality to sort of be faced with while you're looking through resumes,
Right.
right?
Right.
And how'd that work out for you? Did you find that you did hire people who helped you do that and taught you things as you brought them aboard?
No, absolutely. And, right in today's, I am in more of a management role, but I am very much hands-on. And so I
Yeah,
like to get my hand dirty because I like to be able to do and really be in touch with my team and with respect to the
yeah,
work. Because I
yeah.
don't ever want to be in a position where, my boss is coming to me and asking me a question that I cannot answer, and I say, oh,
Right,
I have to go to somebody else to get the answer. I want to be able to
right,
answer and provide that
right.
response on the spot.
Okay.
And
Yes.
so, what I've always done is really sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh no, that's okay. Let me jump in, and if you think of it, come back and let me
Yep,
know. But I've got a follow-up question that maybe will help rejigger that.
sure.
So you're out of Maryland. You've got 2 degrees. One is in aerospace, and one
Mhm.
is in software.
Computer
What was
science.
computer science?
Yeah.
So did you have to make a choice, Nicole, about which one to pursue, or did they fold together in a sense? What did you do when you first went out looking for a role as a, early professional, graduated from college? What was sort of that next phase like?
So my co-op at MITRE was in software development. So when I graduated, I knew it was the clear choice was going to be in software development
Okay. So
because
that was
I
a great
liked,
on-ramp, the
yeah,
co-op
I
itself.
mean, I enjoy, I find myself I like to solve problems. And
Yeah.
so when I find myself, if I'm dealing with a difficult problem in terms of coding, I'm trying to figure out how to write something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I find myself, driving home, on an hour-long commute, and
Yeah.
ideas like going through my head, and I was like, I can't wait to get home to try that,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
it's constant, and that's like that's what excites me, and I
Yes.
really enjoy that. And
Yes.
so going into software development and always constantly solving problems, and for the longest time, I've always been in consulting, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that even I work with customers, right? I go from one industry to the next, I go from one
Mm-hmm.
customer to the next, because what I want to do is, unlike most consultants, I would say, I'm in a position where I like to go in and essentially teach them how to fish, right? I
Mm.
want to build systems that are self-service, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that they're not dependent on me, the IT consultant, to be there kind of to continue to maintain the system. We want to be able to go in, help them with the problem, but then teach them how to maintain the software themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
then also to be able to do a self-service model in the sense that if we're building something for them, if they have another problem or another issue, they're easily able to kind of configure the
Mm-hmm.
software to do that without having to go back to a developer or the
Right.
developer staff to say,
Right.
go back, change this make this change for me because either my requirement has changed or because I have new functionality that I have to then build in. So there's some things that you certainly need to go back to development staff for.
Yeah.
But for the most part, like I said, I always say that I'm lazy because I don't want to do anything twice. I don't want to do anything manual, right?
Right.
So if there's a way for me to automate and make that be a configurable system so that I'm teaching you how to fish and for you to do kind of be self-dependent, that is my goal.
Okay. So you're a teacher at heart as well when it comes to
yes, I like to.
that guide, right? Okay. Well, let me see if we can find I'm curious about whether or not there was one moment or maybe a bunch of moments that helped you figure out that you love problem solving the way that you do. I know we've talked offline a lot about your love of problem solving, and I'm always curious how people come about figuring out their sort of zone of brilliance. So I'm wondering if you have any memories of maybe it's a client problem that you struggled with and then solved in a certain way, or a certain result that you brought forth for a relationship in one of your early consultancy experiences that really lit that light bulb for you. Would you say it was incremental, or was there a moment?
I think I've always had the passion for problem solving, but I would say that kind of to take that further is really when we started working together and looking at, the zone of genius and looking at and working with you on that passion piece.
Yep.
And what I've come to realize is that I really like talking with customers and understanding what their challenges, what their user problems, what the issues are that the users are having. Because having been in consulting for the longest, for quite a long time, I've been there. I've seen the challenges. I know how to solve those problems, right? And so what I'm able to do is kind of incorporate and learn from what I've done before. And the next time I work with another customer, even though the challenges may be the same, I'm able to take what I've done and improve on it because, the technology changes so fast these days. So I can do something different or just do something better to be able to improve on it. And so that's what really excites me, to be honest. It's like, because as I listen to the issue, it's like, oh, I've done that before here. And wheels are constantly turning in my head. It's like, this is what I can do. And it's like, it just comes out.
Exciting.
And so it is very exciting. I love it.
It makes us, and we need people like you who can see through all the enmeshed thoughts and confusion that are in the minds of your customers so that you can be that silver bullet in a sense and bring clarity where it just feels really muddy. And I'm sure a lot of people start out with you feeling as though they're hitting their heads up against that brick wall and just can't find the solution. And that's where they end up calling you. So maybe this is a good spot for us to turn toward that red light, green light, theme that we talk about on red light, green light, and thinking about the red lights being those barriers and the risks that we see or our customers see. And for me, I do the red lights around, messaging and how do we get our audiences to a green light of green lighting our idea and doing that through a balance of head and heart through the messaging. For you, how do you how do you see green lights and red lights in your work? When someone calls you, Nicole, and they have a problem, they're seeing red lights, right? They're unable to move forward without your help. So what do those red lights sound like when you're talking to them, when they're explaining the problem? What are some recurring themes maybe that you've heard over the years around how they're feeling? Why are they blocked?
There's actually, I would say, multiple facets when it comes to kind of the red light. And the reason why I say that is that sometimes it's people. I would say change management is difficult. And it's getting the stakeholder buy-in. I was actually doing some work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, actually, who was in a firm. Actually, we were doing work in the UK, and it was to develop a learning management system for the internal staff.
Okay.
And we had a team, we started doing requirements. We actually went over there to do discovery sessions. We're moving forward. But then essentially the break stopped because we didn't have the stakeholder kind of buy-in.
The buy-in,
And
yes.
so that is very important. And I've learned the same thing with other, engagement and working with other customers as well, is that if you don't have the buy-in, because, we talked earlier about having your internal staff, right, for the company, the customer that we work with, kind of
Yep.
take over and maintain. If they're
Yep.
not brought in, if they are not involved every step of the way, if it's just a matter of, okay, Nicole, I want to hire you in to do this, and then we'd run forward and develop everything, but they're not involved, when it comes time for them to take it over, it's going to be very difficult, right? Because they're not understanding. And so the ramp to understand and be able to maintain it is a much higher. Whereas if we are including and have more of a collaborative, more of a partnership, where they come in, they work with us, they understand the design, they understand the requirements, like they're providing and prioritizing what we do, and their team is part of I would say, more of an integrated team approach, but they are alongside with us doing development, doing the design, right, and code reviews. They understand the process, then they're bought in, and they are set up to be very successful when we leave.
Yep. Okay. So the red light feels like maybe they might start out being more detached or separated from the value that it would be for them to be involved and to buy in completely to this process that you've taught them. And your aim is to get them to say, yeah, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to be able to take it over when you, are off into the sunset, so to speak. Let's just imagine there's someone listening that's in a similar role as you have been, Nicole, that you have, led in. How do you recommend that someone think about trying to get that kind of buy-in from those internal stakeholders? What are some lessons learned? Do you have anything that's worked well or not worked as well that you could share in terms of, how to get that stakeholder buy-in from those internal people?
Right. And I would say that you definitely want to get that buy-in essentially kind of early on. So even before they even kind of come to us with an idea or a concept that they want us to kind of help with. And so, I would say socializing that buy-in, understanding, and what I learned from you is that hook, right?
Yes.
What is the problem? What are the pain points that we're trying to address? And be able to tie either the dollars or in terms of resources or budget, right, to help resolve those issues. And if we're able, if we can help them feel the pain, right, and put them in those shoes, then they can realize this is how these solutions will help them get better, be more efficient, be more productive, right, and really set them up for essentially long-term success.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned the part about the pain. And so for some first-time listeners who might be just joining us, Nicole and others have learned the model we teach, which is the how to model, which is an acronym. And Nicole used the word hook just now because that's the first letter of the model. It's hook me. And these are basically like those cartoon words that you might see above the heads of your audience, right? That you're trying to convince to believe something, buy into something. They're asking you, hook me, get my attention. O is orient me. What's the problem? Where's the pain? And that's what you just said, Nicole. If we can help the stakeholders, make it rhyme, right? Explain the pain. Explain it. Don't just tap it. Bring the audience to the center of that uncomfortable, bottom of the cistern is sort of how I describe it. If we don't share with our audiences how bad that pain is and what it feels like at a heart level, we're not as likely to get that buy-in, because people need to feel the loss of the solution, right? They have to feel like, if I don't do something, I'm going to end up stuck here in this place and continue to feel the same churn, the same discomfort, the same cloudiness. So that's what the O in the model helps us get better at. We tell a story to explain that pain quickly, succinctly, directly. And that's a place where you really drove home and created some storylines around how to explain that pain really well for your stakeholders. And then once we do the O in the how to model, then we crack open that letter W for win me. Like, okay, now I know what the pain is. What's your solution, Nicole? How are you going to create a winning environment for us? And the word to in the how to model is tell me more. In other words, convince me with all the data and facts and proof for why I should buy in. And then the O is an invitation to buy in, which is offer me something to do. So have you, and you liked the hook, though, that H letter seemed like something that really landed with you in terms of why it was important. Can you speak a little bit more about that piece, Nicole?
Yes, absolutely. And the funny thing is that, based on what I've learned from you in terms of the model, as well as what I've learned from others in terms of the storytelling and the presentation, I actually ended up, I offered to my former company essentially and develop a PD session or professional development session to teach others how to do this. And so one person that was on a presentation, that she sent one of my presentation. So when I did another presentation to essentially sell on the tool that we were building as an open source reporting tool, selling to states to be able to improve their accessibility kind of posture and making the report accessible for people with disabilities. And I left out the H. And she called out, he said, "Where's the hook, Nicole?" And I said, "You're absolutely right." And I told her, "You're absolutely right. But when it comes to doing presentations for the audience, like whether anything's very different between the commercial kind of private sector versus public sector, I think you take a different stab in it." So I left out the hook, and it's like she said, "You're absolutely right." And so I had to, put in the hook, and once we did a dry run and reviewed it again, she said, "Yep, now I get it. That's much better."
Yes.
And so I have to listen to my own advice, and I'm glad that she reminded me.
I love it. So. I mean, that's such a great example of spreading the wealth of the knowledge and then teaching it to others who can call us out, right? When we forget, or it's like the whole thing about having people in the room who are smarter than us or who are, going to have our back when we need that nudge. So somebody said, "Where's that hook?" And now I know that you employ that tip consistently as you go forward, and you've gotten good at finding stories around how to persuade, right? And I think I want to kind of sit on this for a second because you're in a very analytic oriented field, and most of our clients who are dealing with a lot of numbers, data, analytic thinkers who don't naturally move toward that heart storyline. Can you share how the story and learning story and playing with story, using it well, and maybe not always perfectly, but how have you begun to infuse story, and what have you noticed about trying it out?
Right. And so I would say, before our work together, I'm very much, I would say, a data nerd. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say that I am driven based on facts, and I make I pride myself on making decisions based on facts and not based on heart. And so after our time together, and again working with other people as well, I learned that you have to emote, right? You have to get connect with people through emotions and make that connection first before you then provide them all the data. And it also, and we've always been taught to, speak to who your audience are and be able to communicate in a way that's going to connect with them. And you have different audiences, and you have some, I would say for the most part, most people will make decisions based on heart and not based on what's kind of up here in the head and be data. But I think with the approach that we talked about, starting with the emotions and then telling them, what can be done, showing them the proof points in terms of data and point at evidence, then really, I would say, complete the story.
Yep, I think that's well said. And that blend of head and heart is the magical combination. And that's where we can really bring both sides of the brain together and in a way that elevates you as the speaker as well, right? And so I
Right.
think it's a boost, frankly, especially for women in tech. So that seems to be a place where I don't know if you have women who code or girls who code. Have you ever dabbled, Nicole, in any kind of volunteer capacity, or have you ever gotten involved in any efforts with the younger generation or young women, or how do you kind of view um, that whole component of being a woman in a heavily tech dominated field, and just any insights, I guess?
So I think this kind of goes back, when I was in college in the engineering field, there was, you're absolutely right. There's very few women in that field.
Mm-hmm.
It is mostly men. And I would say even these days now, there are, I would say still more men. It was funny that I say I think maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was on a contract with, maybe a few hundred other people because it was different contractors. And we one of the sub to that program at actually was at General Services Administration, GSA.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came on, I walked around and getting introduced to the team. It was interesting that one of the developers actually came back to me and said, I did not think you were PM because you were so young. And
Oh,
it's also being a
wow.
woman.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
I remember that, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't see personally, I've been one of those people that really don't let the gender
Yeah.
be a distraction
That's
or
good.
kind of
Yeah.
prevent me from doing things. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I know who I am, I know my
Yeah.
capabilities, I know my strengths, and I know that when I stack up against other people, I am
Yeah.
just as
You know.
just as good, if not better.
Yeah, exactly. You know your stuff. You've got the pieces of paper and the degrees,
Right.
but the experiences are what create who you are and
Yes.
how you go into the world and help others and leave that eventual
Right.
legacy, if you
Right.
will. So,
And I would
yeah.
say I work with other women. It's even still on my team. There's not a lot of women, and so what I do is really kind of through coaching and
Hmm.
mentoring by doing. And so
Yeah. I
I
love
have
that.
folks that I don't seek to mentor, but just I think based on our working together, people learn by working with other people that are
Yep.
good at their craft.
Yep.
And so I've been able
Exactly.
to kind of instill some of those kind of skill sets, kind of what my experience to those folks. And so when they have a problem or if they're trying to um, kind of figure out how to solve a problem, how to
Hmm.
respond
Hmm.
to a problem, how to communicate,
Yeah.
I would help them kind of craft, right, so
Right.
that it's in a way that is non-threatening,
Yep.
that's not kind of sound off as being defensive, but find a way
Hmm.
to kind of help disarm
Yes.
the audience, essentially whoever
Oh,
the email
I'm
recipient is.
yes. I'm glad you said that because I had a mental note to touch on this. I think you really excel at listening because it's like one of your superpowers with the way that you get to the bottom of problems quickly and efficiently by virtue of being a good listener to those customers you're trying to get all this information from. So,
Right.
can you talk a little about listening and how you became a better one, or where you learned to do that, or just riff on that for a minute for us?
Sure. So I would say, being in consulting, we have to be good listeners because we have to understand what the customer's needs are and
Mm-hmm.
be able to come up with with solutions so you're able to solve
Mm-hmm.
them. So if
Yeah.
you're not listening, then you're
Mm-hmm.
not really kind of as I answering the call, right? Kind of why they came to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I the act the act I guess of active listening
Mm-hmm.
is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had a customer that I uh, work with who was really surprised when I was impacted by all this kind of, I would say, federal government kind of chaos.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
she's like, you know what? I was the best person in this role because I listened, right? And I was able to propose solutions because I learned to listen and I knew their challenges. I was able to kind of be alongside and be able to empathize, right, with their
Yes.
situation. And
Yes.
so while what I would say that what I also do is that as a consultant, I'm here to advise and to provide recommendations. But at the end of the day, you are the customer, right? And you have to decide what's in your best interest. At the end
Right.
of the day, once a decision has been made, my role is to support you, right?
Yes.
To minimize risks and make the solution work.
Yes. Yes.
And so
I
I
love that.
don't push back. I don't try to say, no, I don't fight it to say, this is my way.
Yeah.
And some people do that. They fight and they challenge the customer and trying to get them to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, we have to be respectful, right? And be able to guide and teach. And I believe that is my role as a consultant, is to guide, to teach, right? And to mentor and to help them succeed in whatever way I can.
Right. And I think when you are able to provide a customer with two directions they could go in, right? Recommend the one you feel is best based on your professional opinion, the rationale, and the data in front of you. As long as you are, or anyone, right, feels good about your presentation of those two options, if the customer chooses the one that you didn't recommend, as long as you feel like you clearly and directly and effectively delivered both options, you're right. That's their choice, and you're going to support whichever path they're going to take you down. And they might change course later. They might come aboard your recommendation at a later date because more funding is available, for example, or new talent has been hired and now it's more possible, whatever that might be.
Right.
But I think you're wise to continue along their path. Meeting them where they are is really what you're doing.
Exactly. That's absolutely correct. And I would say, our job is to inform, right? Give them all the facts so they can make a decision.
Right.
But the other thing that we could do is, for me, sometimes not making decision is almost as bad as making the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
and so
it's a
you can
decision
certainly make a
still, right?
decision.
Exactly.
So you can make a decision, and what we can do is, given these days, you can test it out, right? Sometimes may heard of the term kind of MVP, right, or minimal viable product. So you can build something, right, just to test out the waters, to get to see how something tangible to put in front of users and customers to get feedback. And if it's the wrong path, then you can always pivot. It's not too late. Right. And that's why, it's probably another conversation, but this is why I love the agile process in terms of methodology for software development. So.
Yes. And it's like, grab all the good nuggets from the test that you've done and then go forward to the next phase. And then if you need to, you can grab the learnings from earlier and apply them to where you are now. And then you just continually grow and iterate and learn. And that's the process of innovation, right? That's what makes it such a fun process, especially for people who, like you, who just enjoy the journey almost more than the destination in some ways, right? I love that. I love that. Nicole, I have a question about legacy, and then I have a question about your outside interests, and then we'll kind of not role play, but we'll pick maybe like a fun storyline to finish up here for the end of the podcast. But when, so many people I talk to, work with, and support are in this area of, 20, 25, 30 years in business, really excellent at what they do and have found their groove, if you will. They kind of know what they're good at most of the time. When I meet them, we're working on how to, polish that, chisel that for more impact at scale, perhaps. And they're looking ahead, right? We've got whatever it is, 10 more years in the workforce, or 15, or then I'm going to do this. And then we start using that kitschy word, perhaps legacy, right? It's a very common word to be using. But what do you hope when you kind of turn off the light of your career path? What do you hope you've been able to do for others, or for businesses or for the youth? What's on your mind when you think of that word legacy?
When I look at legacy, it's not necessarily kind of from a business perspective in
Okay.
terms of the impact I've made, but also the people.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned earlier about the journey, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're on a journey, you're alongside your teammates, your coworkers, your
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, right? Certainly your customers are one of them,
Mm-hmm.
but your teammates are the ones that's gonna stay with you from one customer to the other. So in terms of your team.
Mm-hmm.
And so the impact that I want to have on them is, things that they've learned from me, things that we've learned from each other. But at the
Mm.
end of the day, I also want it to be fun, right? It's not,
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer of, working hard and playing hard,
Sure.
but
Sure.
building that
Yes.
culture of, I would say, trust, integrity, when I know that, they know that I've got their back
Yes.
and they have my back. I would say that is kind of the culture, the legacy that I want to leave behind with my
Ah,
team.
I love that. Okay, I'm gonna plug quickly a previous guest we had here, Jeff Rogers, who talks about that I've got your back moment. And and it's right in line with what you just said, Nicole. So he used to do Second City and did a lot of improv. And I forget the term, but it is like this I've got your back move that all of the improv actors do before they step out onto the improv stage, and they just tap each other on the shoulder. And that is a message, like, when we get out on the stage and we start doing all this improv, this iteration, this innovative iteration of, comedy, I've got your back. There's nothing you can say when we're in the middle of this innovation stage work that I will drop. I will pick it up. I will take whatever silly thing you say or idea that you've got, and I'm going to turn it into something cool or funny or pass it along. And there's great trust in that. And you are doing that on IT teams, and
Yes.
people are doing that everywhere, because it is about the people and it is about the culture. And I think that's a really great answer. It's about the people, it's about the culture. One thing you said reminded me of how, I don't know if you have siblings. I can't remember, Nicole.
I do.
But
Two sisters.
two sisters. Okay. Well, like, it's sort of like teammates, to your point earlier. Your longest relationships in life are your siblings. And it's like the most impact, and the people you work with the most in your work life are your teammates. And so there's that longevity and that long-term trust, whereas customers come and go. Maybe friendships would be the alternative way to think about that from that family perspective. But yeah, your coworkers are a little like your siblings sometimes. Love them, hate them, but you're with them for the long haul.
Right. And if you're talking about how much time we spend in meetings, I probably spend more time,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
yeah,
with them than I do with my own siblings.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's a great answer. I love that. Tell us, Nicole, what are some things outside of work that draw your interest? What do you enjoy doing when you're not at all thinking about work and you're just thinking about play?
Oh, that's easy. I love to travel. I
Okay.
love to bake. I would say I'm a foodie, and I would
Okay.
say, um, and the other thing too is working out and being healthy and being fit.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
say that, since I have two girls and
Mm-hmm.
my second one is 17 years old.
Okay.
And
That's
when I had her, I said, I'm not going to have any more. And
mm-hmm.
I want to be in the best kind of fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fittest I've ever been. And so
Mm-hmm. That's so
17
great.
years ago, I started working out, and
Yep.
I worked out like 5 days a week. And then we came to
Mm-hmm.
6 days a week. And before COVID, it was 6 days a week, 1 day of rest. And since
Okay.
COVID, 7 days a week. And so I've
That's
got really almost, right, we're now March, it's talking about 4 years ago from COVID. I've got a
Gosh.
4 year streak, Cindy. And
Jeez.
I'm afraid to let it go, because doing another 4 year streak is going to be hard.
That is hard.
And so,
Well, 1 year at a time, one day at a time, one
yes,
little bite at a time. That's how we eat an elephant, right? Oh,
exactly.
I think that's great. I think that's funny. There's some apps out there now like Duolingo, and I have like a prayer app, for example, and I'm trying not to break my streak on those
Yes.
apps. And they're maniacally motivating to try not to break that streak. And so congratulations on your workout streak, because you're light years ahead of my workout streak, but that's okay.
But I haven't recently started to incorporate more of so on the one day, it is like more of I wouldn't say it's not a rest day, because again, I would break my streak, but I do focus more on yoga, on more kind of more mobility, right? So stretching.
Well, yeah. I
And
mean,
so,
our bodies and our brains need rest. Those are things we need, and we need to recover as well. And so those are ways you can vary the exercise routine for yourself when it's yoga, right?
Yeah, and
well, the reason I wanted to pop in and ask the fun questions about what you like to do outside of work is I was thinking it'd be fun for our audience to just take those topics and think about those, because this is really what I ask people to do when it comes to storytelling and choosing stories. And so, today Nicole said she loves to travel, she loves to bake, and she loves to work out. And when I work with clients about the kinds of stories we need to build, these are the places I start. And we sort of lay out, what are you passionate about? Where do you spend your time outside of work? And so, Nicole, we've already done this for you, but we've pulled travel stories, food stories, and I use the gym analogy frequently about how do you improve your presentation skills or your rehearsal. You go to the gym and you have to lift weights every day to get that stronger muscle. And so these are such simple ways for us to go in and pull personal storylines that resonate with business cases without being cheesy or, sounding silly. We can pull really interesting threads from simple storylines that bring the speaker alive just for that short time in the beginning of a presentation. And then it can blend beautifully into whatever you're trying to share with that stakeholder audience that's business related. So, where are you heading next for your travels? Where have you been recently that you're just like, oh my gosh, I've got to go back? Anything top of mind?
There are so many places that I want to go, and the world is just, so fast. Yes. I would say one of the places that we would go back to would be Paris. We went there for my husband and our 20th anniversary. But I'm actually heading, my older daughter has a spring break next week, so we're going to be visiting some of the national parks. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh. Beautiful. Well, you'll have plenty of places to pick up more stories. Yeah. So that's what I love to think about when I'm not at work, is where am I collecting those little pebbles of storylines, and how can I turn them into some interesting gold for whatever might be coming next for presentations or messages. So I love that. Well, Nicole, this has been so helpful. My final question for you is, if you have a young professional who's interested in IT, who's listening, who's watching, who's not so sure about all this heart stuff and this presentation skills stuff and these skills you've shared, what's one piece of advice you might share with someone who feels reticent about jumping in?
I've always thought that, and this is certainly a plug for you, and maybe a different user base for you, would be, I think some of these lessons that we're doing that I'm learning now, I wish I learned like years ago when I was much younger, because it takes practice, right? And so being able to learn how to present, how to think through, how to present through storytelling, and just different aspects.
Yep.
Is something that you need to practice. And so if you're introduced to those concepts much earlier on in your career, and you're practicing, then it becomes second nature.
Yes. Oh, well, that was an unplanned plug, just so everybody knows. But I think that's a thread I'm seeing through a lot of folks that we've worked with. It's like, I wish I'd have learned more about this earlier. So that's a wonderful piece of advice. And for those listening, we have tons and tons of completely free content that's really juicy and focused at our YouTube channel. And every week, that's why I'm doing this podcast to begin with, is to share the storylines of those we are hosting, and also chime in and pull out, some of those threads and nuggets so that you, our listeners, can grab a hold of something you've heard today or in our other episodes and apply that, and just have that awareness, because awareness is step one. Like, boy, I might want to think about how to get good at this and feel comfortable and confident, because that's how you grow and rise above in wherever your career path will take you. So yeah, that's a great thought. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today. This was a really fun conversation, as I knew it would be. We were able to tap a bunch of different areas and land the plane at the end with your travel excitement and some of your passions. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Cindy, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes, you are most welcome. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned. We drop episodes every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern. We will be back again next week with another amazing guest who's going to share stories and experiences that are going to help you arrive sooner than later at the U 2.0. So get out there, go try out bringing someone from the red light of risk to the green light of go, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.